Hello, everybody. Welcome to Everybody Matters, our Family and Friends edition. I'm Jill Catherine, and I'll be hosting our call. And I apologize for, coming in a minute late. We just finished every week we do a virtual chat for those on this healing journey. And so we just ended that call and took me a second to tune in here. So this is the second time we're doing this call, and I just want to give us a minute here for people to tune in and get on our call here. And if you feel comfortable letting us know you're here, please do. You can do so right on the chat function. That would be great to let us know that you're here. And this is our opportunity as family and friends to get our own support, particularly as we know it's a very difficult disease to deal with for our loved ones, who are going through this, and that you need support just as much as they do, and how your support can contribute to their healing as well. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was to outline a little bit of how we're going to be approaching our family and friends session moving forward. And so what we're looking to do is have each call each month will be themed. We'll have a topic that we're going to discuss. And so what that will allow us to do is continue to all come to this conversation from a place that's educational about this disease and how we can be of support and get our own support, because each of us who are in this journey have a situation that's unique to our own. Our friend or a family member, there's very specific needs that they have that's unique to every single family. And so the purpose of this call isn't to get into those specific nuances of what you all may be dealing with, but to speak more broadly and generally about how family and friends can support those who are struggling as well as be supported. And I think that's one of the most critical things, is for you all to know that you need support too, because this is an extremely challenging disease that affects anyone in the immediate circle. And your well-being and you being able to have community and support and get some education around this is not just critical for you, but critical for the healing of your family member or friend. So what we'll start is each week we'll have a topic that we'll specifically talk about, and then people can ask questions and dive into that topic that we're discussing. But again, our goal is to keep it a more broad conversation around, eating disorder healing and recovery. So we are actually going to move. This Family and Friends edition will be held on the second Wednesday of every month. And so our next session will occur on August 12th. And so one of the reasons why we're choosing that second Wednesday of the month is we serve a number of people out of the Central New York region through the Upstate Eating Disorder Service. Their office held at Ophelia's Place in Liverpool. And actually at Ophelia's Place, starting in September, the fourth Wednesday, so the last Wednesday of every month, will be a family and friends support group for people to go to. And so we do have a number of people we serve in that area. So we wanted to spread out within a month, that on the second Wednesday of the month, you can get a virtual chat and support. And then those who live in that area and are able to attend an in-person support group happens on the last Wednesday of the month. So 2 opportunities through that month for support. So that's the format we'll be moving into moving forward. And so one of the things, the themes that I'd like to talk about today is eating disorders 101. You know, how did we get here and what we can do? And I think, you know, there's a lot of good literature out there and books to be read, and some not so great. But you know, a trusted source is we have on Ophelia's Place website some suggested reading and resources that is content we've read and think can be of help to those who are supporting others. But one of the things that is often talked about, and it's a book that, you know, I've read and still reference, it's called Regaining Yourself by Dr. Ira Sacker. And what he talks about a lot in terms of, he's treated people for years with eating disorders and is bold in his treatment approach. But one of the things he shares, and I think is most helpful for those of us who are understanding what this disease is all about, is how identity plays such a role for those who are struggling, is really struggling with uncovering and discovering their identity and who they are and what is true for them. You know, oftentimes, and I'm sure you become familiar with this, that those who struggle in this way have a very high level of anxiety, you know, very highly sensitive beings. And learning how to manage that anxiety is you know, a lifelong job. But that a lot of the times is what that hindrance is into going into deeper ways of discovering who they are. So when I talk about identity, you know, sometimes we have our identities wrapped up into conditions that change. You know, for me, I played a sport. My whole identity was being this athlete. And then when I was struggling with my eating disorder, and I couldn't play the sport anymore. And so it just became this whole very difficult thing to deal with, discovering who we are beyond what we do and what our title is discovering really who we are in a deeper place, into what our values are, what we believe in, what our interests are, what our passions are. And so there's many different routes as to why and how someone comes to the place of struggling with this disease. And that's really unique to anybody. But the most common thing that those of us experience on this journey is really a search of identity, a sense of self. You know, that's why Ira talks about regaining yourself, because the eating disorder becomes the identity. When we're not sure who we are, what we stand on, and have a strong sense of self, inner self, the eating disorder becomes that for us. And trying to let that go becomes more fearful than keeping it and being sick. And that's part of the psychological disease that happens with it, and not to mention the underfeeding of the body and what that does to our brain chemistry. But I wanted to bring up and talk about the importance of how a root issue here for those of us on this path is identity. And so as family and friends, you know, what you can do to help support that recovery process is something that we talked about on our first call, was the value of having a treatment team in place and allowing the treatment team to do their job. So essentially, you not becoming the food police. You know, you can have a relationship with the treatment team, and that's appropriate for that person, whether a family or friend, but your job is not the food police, but to one way is to really help cultivate an environment where they can start to feel safe to discover who they are and help attribute to that process. Dr. Sacker talks a lot about in his treatment for those who are struggling, that how in his conversation with them, he doesn't, focus on the eating disorder and the food and the weight. He starts to just talk human to human, get to learn who they are and where their fears are and what they're passionate about and what their interests are, and start to go into that deeper place of human to human and that sense of connection. And for parents and friends of those who are struggling, having these deeper conversations that we expose our own vulnerability and our own authenticity and our own moments of searching and seeking and questioning and learning who we are and and what that process was like for us. Becoming vulnerable in that way can be really healing and helpful, because in that healing journey, the most critical thing is to get the body stabilized. That's so critical. And that's where having a treatment team, like we talked about before, is essential. But our jobs, as those who love this person, if we can, is then how can we feed the seeking, the person, the self within that is lost and is looking for a sense of place and purpose and identity, that even though the person might really love the eating disorder and that's working for them, we know the dangers of that. They know the dangers of it. And there's always this, if we can speak to a place inside of them, because we all have that place inside of us that is really, that knows this is not well. It's not a way to move through the world. It's painful, it's suffering. And that we really do want a sense of not having it, even though if we feel like we have it, we really want to have is a sense of connection to who we are and to know who we are and have security in who we are and confidence in who we are and a foundation in who we are. And if we have community, particularly our family and our friends, that can help support us on that journey, that's, that is a very powerful support system to have. And so it's little things, I think for those of us when we're struggling with this disease, you start to, it consumes you. It consumes all of you. It changes your brain, the neuroscience, it shows us now what people have been saying for decades about this disease. It changes the way you think. And so you can't really remember. You're in a different frame of mind, and maybe remember what the things you used to love to do, the ways in which someone used to find joy and purpose, and so when we have a support system that can nurture that for us, help remind us, help initiate conversation or outings and doing things that are not about, not about the disease, but are about the spirit, that are about, lifting their spirits up. And you can't underestimate the importance of that and the value of that. And so when we talk about that commonality that happens with those of us struggling, is that identity piece, is how it's an opportunity to, as the support system, to really take a look at your own path and how you dealt with those difficult times in your life and discovering who you are, and even those self-destructive habits and beliefs that happen. I mean, that sense of sharing and connection has a great value into offering support to someone who is struggling. So thinking about your own identity, helping them to discover their identity, having real conversation, not just focusing on the disease, um, is are helpful tools in this journey. Okay, and so there's a lot of other reasons how we get to this place, and for those who are struggling, and there's traumas people happen, and this is a coping mechanism, and but there, for all of us, there's this sense of um, emotional disconnect that the disease allows us to have. Emotionally, we just can't feel what we're needing to feel, and that disease can certainly play a role in numbing our emotions, and not having to feel those uncomfortable feelings. And so how we all get there really is important for each of you uniquely, knowing that journey and that story for whoever it is that you love who's struggling, being able to really listen to what those triggering points were for them. Because we don't just wake up with the eating disorder. It's a combination of our genetics, our DNA, but also influences and outside expectations and internal characteristics. It's such a combination of outside factors and inside factors that being able to uniquely listen to this, or being able to listen to the unique story of whoever it is that you love, and without judgment or without judgment, period. We all have a different resiliency in terms of our emotional selves, our physical selves, our mental selves. We're all different and unique. And so what might be non-traumatic to one person could be severely traumatic to another person. And so our goal is to be able to just listen and understand from a place of compassion, whatever that story is for that person that brought them on this path. Because the affirmation for those struggling, the affirmation that we can get from our support, who really hear what we say without judgment and tell us, oh, it really wasn't that bad, or you just need to buck up and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. None of that is supportive for them, and just adds to that shaming cycle that the disease infestors in them. So it just contributes to that. So, and then being able to, community is so important to understanding what we can do for those who are struggling, because it's a very exhausting disease that can make people feel very isolated. They want to isolate when they're struggling through this. And they tend to then present behaviors that pushes other people away. And so as loved ones, as family members, having the practice to love unconditionally and being able to honor and acknowledge the struggles and pains, whatever they have had, and then also helping them to discover their identity, really then becomes a process that you all inadvertently start to engage in on your own. You start to engage in your own, you can't help but to think about your own story, and you can't help but to think about how you were influenced, and the roles you took on, and the ways that you think about your body and what's unique to you, and then you can't help but to think about then, as you're helping someone to create a space and that they can feel safe to discover who they are, and you in fact are helping to encourage that, um, you can't help but to do that for yourself and really do your own reflection and think about what you're interested in and how you got about that process. So that offering that sense of community could be such a critical component into what you can do and how we can help our loved ones without harming them. There's a lot of talk with eating disorders how it's about control. And the old literature would say it's all about control, and now the new literature will say, well, it's not so much about control, that's a part of it. But I think what's important to know is when control is obviously part of this disease, which is very complicated, and layered for everybody. But I think what's important to recognize about control is the control of not having to feel what you're feeling. Sort of, it's a false sense of control. Want to control not allowing ourselves to feel, and that's a impossible thing to do, because as human beings, we are feeling centered by nature. We're hardwired to feel, by with our mind and a consciousness, and we have emotions in our brain. It's all neurologically in our species is wired to feel. So you can't avoid feeling. And so much about the control is really about the control of not having to feel uncomfortable feelings. And this is another opportunity where we can give language and give voice and conversation to the person we're supporting, sharing our own journeys, how we manage our uncomfortable feelings, what we do, how that process has been for us, the starts and the stops and the challenges that creates. So it's inadvertently, as we're supporting someone else through this, we're really doing a lot of self-examination and sharing, because being able to find in this healing process for those who are struggling, I mean, there's a steep learning curve of being able to learn how to be comfortable with uncomfortable emotions, with fear and rejection and pain and sadness. Learning to allow yourself to feel that is step one. And then how do you, then learn to be able to move through the world feeling those things at time without then falling into old patterns and self-destructive ways. And so that's a huge part of this recovery process for them. And so having a support system of people, and particularly family members and parents, who can offer a safe space to do that, to learn to process one's feelings, be able to share and communicate ways in which they've done it themselves, and then provide a safe space of practicing that as a family moving forward. And that, brings us to something that we talk about, we'll talk about in future sessions too, is in terms of how necessary it is for you all to get support, for you to, tune into a conversation like this and then take time for self-care in your own way, because it's a very, it's a disease that really hits us on the core in so many different levels, because one to heal through this really has to go in deeply into the layers of themselves and to their emotional self, and really start to go deep in that way and take a look at beliefs and thoughts that they have, that are those seeds that have been planted that just are feeding this disease. One has to do that. One can't stay on the surface and just, do their meal plan and, get to a healthy weight or a healthy weight, whatever that is for that person, and just stay on the surface and everything's going to be okay. That's not how it works. That's it, that won't sustain, you know, to yeah, you have to stay in your meal plan and you have to stabilize your neurology, the brain chemistry that's happening with the underfeeding. So that's what the nutritional part becomes so critical about, because once that imbalance can start to be rebalanced is where the deeper work can happen, because we're physically more stable and mentally, where we can go into that deeper place of the emotional self and take a look then of what's also in terms of belief systems and values and that we have. So to think that your loved one can do this in a vacuum from you is I think is setting yourself up for a difficult journey. It is their journey to be had, for sure, and it's not yours, but you're on the journey with them, and you can't help, just like, as a hiker, I think about, when you do a long hike, you have food stops and mail stops along the way. People who hike the Appalachian Trail, they pick up in towns food and along the way. Or if you run, in road races, you have people who have stop and give you water along the way, right? So you're all part of that. You are the mail stop, you're the handing out the water. You're part of that. And as you know, I mean, anytime when you're involved in someone else's journey, it's theirs, but you can't help but to be in relationship to it. Standing there giving water, you're going to look at all these runners and you're going to, reflect and encourage, and you're going to be in relationship to them. You're not just standing there giving water, right? So you are affected by that process. And one of the key ways in which you can help in the healing journey is by using it as an opportunity for you yourself to listen. We're all imperfect here, and no one is all powerful, encompassing, and does everything right in life, and none of us are perfect the way we are, and we can't grow. Life is a growing process. So the more that we all embrace as the support system an opportunity for us to grow and to go deeper and to learn about how to manage our emotions and be present with our emotions and allow people to have emotions and honor them without getting all wrapped up into them, and also how taking a look at our own belief systems and how we are thinking about our bodies and how we talk about our bodies and how we define health, how we define success, how we define beauty. I mean, the cultural and external definitions and standards certainly play a role in those of us who struggle with this disease. But I want to emphasize that's not the only part of it, because then every single person in the world doesn't have an eating disorder. A significant portion do, but not all do, because the disease part of it has internal components that those of us are more susceptible or sensitive to, in terms of this disease, having this disease for ourselves. So, but not to dismiss, though, as we're supporting someone who's struggling with this, there are, those external norms that we've all come to believe to be true. And the more in the support system, then we can start to question those ourselves and ask ourselves what we really believe and why do we believe that way, and is is the next diet and the next diet and next diet, do we support that process and that belief system? I mean, are we encouraging that? Do we do that behavior ourselves? I mean, these are all really important things to take a look at, and not from a place of blaming ourselves or shaming that it's our fault that, you know, the person, our family member is sick. It's not about blame, but it's about self-awareness, because the person who's suffering in their healing journey, becoming self-aware is most critical. Becoming aware of how they think and how they feel and what's true to them, having a strong sense of self, creating an identity, having a sense of self, having identity is the most important equation, right? Is that journey. And so as you and their support system, being able to have a conversation about that is so helpful. It's extremely healing. And then you also to have your own self-awareness may contribute in healing ways that you're not even aware of right now. There might be ways that you think and express and talk and share content on Facebook that could be adding to this perpetual cycle of obsession that our culture has, that weight equals health and beauty equals bodies that look like this, and we might not even be realizing how we're being influencers, potentially negative influencers to our loved one, just because we haven't needed to have to look at it, because we ourselves might not struggle with the disease that, yeah, you know, then some people have no issue going on diet to diet to diet. So they've never really had to take a look at that. But when you're supporting someone who does have an issue, and that creates an unsafe environment, can make you look at okay in deeper ways. And what is this obsession with the marketing and the diet industry and the health and fitness industry that keeps telling us these things, yet people are getting sicker and sicker and sicker. So something's not adding up. And so by us questioning what we're just buying into and believing to be true, and starting to do our own investigation, can contribute to the wholeness of the family unit in general. Because that means other people beyond those who's just sick, who are saying, we're all in this together. There's different ways we all can sort of be learning about this and thinking in this way, and exploring emotional resiliency and emotional intelligence, and how do we honor that and see that as a skill and a trait and a gift to be able to be honest with how we're feeling and be able to communicate how we're feeling without getting in yelling, screaming matches or shutting down or, leaving. These are all really essential human skills to have, powerful skills to have, that are translatable in so many different ways to work in the world. So this eating disorder is a very devastating mental illness that one can struggle with because of the complexity of the disease, with the nutritional component and the malnutrition of the body and what that does to the mind. But when we can understand that and accept that and really get it from the scientific point of view and what happens to the brain, as opposed to, can't they just eat the food and get better? That's like trying to put a round peg in a square hole. They just don't go together, those two philosophies, But once we can understand really what's going on physiologically, and I know our folks at the Upstate New York Eating Disorder Service, through their treatment philosophy, with the metabolic testing, really helps us to understand what's going on in the body, so we can understand this scientifically. And then when we can embrace what this is allowing us to review psychologically and socially and culturally for ourselves, for our family unit, for a loved one, it can be a very powerful opportunity to get closer as a family, one that's built on open communication and unconditional love and trust and encouragement and and support, and being able to listen. I think that comes up a lot in families who are supporting those loved ones is being able to listen to what's really being shared, these deeper things that are come up through their healing, and be able to listen from a place of not feeling defensive. I think that's so hard for family members. It was so hard for my family members who are, wonderful, human beings, to not feel defensive, when they're hearing things that I had shared that were difficult for me in our family unit. And they had the best of intentions, right? But so being able to listen from a place of openness and non-judgment and realize, and a place of self-learning. Humility is a big part of this journey, is being humble to understand that you can't, number one, you can't force someone, that just eat, that sense of wanting to just force them, that sense of control, is a big part of this, and that you just can't demand it to be happening. And so it really teaches us how to, have a sense of humility and realize the intricacies and the complexities that we all have as emotional people, because we are. And particularly for those of us who are struggling with this disease, the emotional body, that emotional component, is a significant factor. Significant factor. Learning how to, I just got off a call with, for those who are struggling, and always what we end up talking about every week is is that journey of being okay with uncomfortable feelings and not wanting to run from them or hide from them. And what we do to each other is offer each other encouragement, how we get through those times. And not just how we get through those times, but that what I try to do is bring a sense of normalcy, that's natural to life, is to have these uncomfortable times, that's these difficult things to deal with and difficult emotions, and that nothing's wrong with us and we didn't do anything bad to feel that way. And, because those of us struggling, we sort of inherently, there's this belief that we're wrong or bad or something to be feeling these negative emotions. And we internalize them to be something wrong with us, instead of just feeling what we're feeling and letting it move through and learn from it and let it ride itself out. There's a lot of fear to feel that, because we've internalized them as something wrong with us or something bad. So being able to have that own self-awareness of what they're experiencing and how you can contribute to their healing journey is so important. And also being able to get your own, self-care. There's significant value in family members having their own, counselor they can talk to, or family counseling that they can have, or couples counseling, because having a safe space to be able to, the intense emotions that family members experience watching someone they love go through this disease is very powerful and really overwhelming. And some can, whatever is feels right for you all, but I just want to always give an encouragement of the value in and being able to speak to someone, independent, and you just be able to get everything off your chest and get some of your own insight and growth and counseling and support and what you can do. And that can, be an incredible addition to those who are struggling. So self-care for you all is really important. So, kind of circling back to where we started this conversation, is eating disorders are the journey to this mental illness is unique, very unique. And the treatment, although our treatment team, built with a nutritionist, a medical doctor, a psychologist or psychiatrist, a counselor of sorts, and community support groups is pretty standard in terms of that the type of team someone needs to recover. You need all those components. But how those components, like the levels of care, the inpatient, outpatient, partial hospitalization, sort of the levels of care are different. And we'll do a session on what those levels of care are. But that's different to everyone. How their recovery process will look like is different to everyone, is unique to each person. But so how we all get here is unique in a sense, and how we heal is unique. But the commonalities that bring us all here are, highly sensitive in our bodies and learning to manage our emotions, and most importantly, having a sense of identity, is feeling safe to be who we are, to learn who we are, to discover who we are, because we're afraid we won't be accepted, we won't be loved, we won't be loved and accepted as who we are. And the eating disorder, keeps us physically on a very superficial level, and is obsessed with our bodies on a very superficial level, thinking that we'll be safe and loved, and but that's where that's coming from. It's that deeper place of really wanting to be who we are, and to learn who we are, and discover who we are. So identity is a very important part of the process. And I think that the last part I want to say about identity for tonight is how, for us being the supporting cast, is being mindful how identity isn't about, a job title, or, our racial profile or ethnic background. Identity, what we're really looking for is a deeper connection to a sense of self that's really based in more of our values, of how we naturally think and feel in the world. That's who we are individually, each of us uniquely. And those who struggling is feeling a sense of lack of self-worth, that they're not worthy of expressing what that natural way is to be. And that natural way to be could be a job title and a job name, but I say it's not important to focus on what that looks like on the outside, because that can change. So if we just encourage a conversation that is about, the identity is wrapped up in a job title or in a job, well, what happens if that job changes? We lose then our sense of self and who we are, because who we are is not the job. Who we are is what we bring to the job, right? Who we are is not our major. It's what we're bringing into that major. And what that looks like can be expressed many different ways. It can look like different jobs. So when we're encouraging a space of identity development and searching for identity, it's really about affirming and encouraging a space of that one's natural way of thinking and feeling and expressing themselves is okay. That there's that there's purpose in that. You know, I was always told my natural way, always from as little as I can be moving through the world, was I always wore my heart on my sleeve. I've always had a big heart. I just intuitively, inherently was open to people who didn't look like me or talk like me, but I just always felt like an open heart and I could connect with anybody. And and I remember being a young person and people saying this to me, saying, you know, Jill, um, the only problem you have is that you wear your heart on your sleeve. That's your problem, is that you wear your heart on your sleeve. That, you know, because I'd be sensitive, right? And so it'd be like, that was my problem, is that I wore my heart on my sleeve. And something I've had to do in my healing and building a sense of self and identity is to learn that that's that's who I am. That's not my problem. That's my gift to being in the world, is that I am open, that I'm accepting, I'm loving by nature. That is what my nature is, and how that expresses itself in the world can look a lot of different ways. But inherently, I really internalized that, you know, that was something that something was wrong with that way of being. And so what we want to do is to affirm our natural ways of being, and then help give the tools to manage that way in the world. You know, it'd been great to learn those tools as a young person. In case someone, Jill, someone, you're heart centered, you follow your heart, you listen to your heart, you live your life by your heart. So how can you start to negotiate and learn these tools when you're in the world and people have different intentions, and people have their own fears and worries and insecurities that might be projected back on you? And you know, just learning how to, someone who has that open heart, how do you manage, you know, anger and frustration and rejection and that kind of stuff. And that was something very difficult for me, was how do I manage that? And that was a triggering point for me in terms of the rise to my eating disorder, was that significant, you know, dealing with loss and rejection and not knowing how to process those feelings. So so again, it's important to affirm and encourage identity development, not from a place of what box do you fit in or what check mark can you check off on this form, but, you know, in the core of you, who are you? What do you value? What motivates you? What inspires you? What speaks to your heart? So, um, you know, as we come to a close for this week's call, I want us um, to think about as being the supporting cast, and that it's their journey to be had, but we're certainly part of it, and how we can take this opportunity to do our own self-observation and reflection, cultivate conversation and space around exploring and discovering of self and sharing stories, and use that as an opportunity to be supportive to your loved one, and also to remember to get the support for yourself and to do the things that you need to do to keep yourself healthy and well in mind and body and soul. So we will be back again with our video chat on Wednesday, August 12th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we'll have another topic to talk about, another theme to talk about. And hopefully you'll join us then and engage and, you know, ask questions and continue the conversation. So till then, I wish you all well a couple of weeks, and see you soon. Thank you.